Hey beautiful family, let me start by sending an abundance of love from myself to whoever you are and wherever you're watching from. I know there's a lot of new people here at the channel, and you've all arrived off the back of my sharing my experience with our angelic helpers, which I have probably primitively labelled the beings of blue light. And I just want to say on a personal level, I've been doing a lot of inner work, and the journey I've been through in Africa has been quite strenuous on me as a human being. And I let go and decided I would speak from my heart, and to be met with thousands of testimonials and all of this love off the back of that, I am just so grateful, and my heart is so nourished by that. And I want to give a lot of thanks and love to all of you who are here and sharing so openly your experiences and so bravely as well. So welcome to our YouTube family community, Feather's Tail family as I call it, which is the name of the children's village that we built. The Beings of Blue Light video, I think, opens up a very beautiful conversation to make an inquiry together, because if some of us are having experiences with these beings of a higher spiritual realm, maybe we can say a higher dimension if your language is that way inclined, then I think it's interesting to start looking at who we are as human beings and who we are as vibrational beings, and what it means when we forget that and we live a lesser version of who we can be. And at this time on the planet where we have so much discussion, which happens generation after generation in a different form, about oppression and corruption and deception, I want to tie this in with an event that's going on and ongoing in my life, and that is that I have said throughout the pandemic that the way I address it is to surrender to the stillness and the silence. And of course, from the identity of the personal self, the separated self from the present moment, from source, from the super consciousness, from the state of pure attention, then this sounds like you have to take your personal identity and sit still. And of course, this is not what I'm meaning. And I think I want to go on this inquiry with you, if I can, not speaking as John, but hopefully trying to speak as a speaker from the position of this human you see before you, who surrendered personal identity best he could and watched as spirit moved in my life and used and expressed its power in this world through the vehicle that I moved the personal identity away from, or let go of instead of clinging to. And so many oppose my view on that, and even today I have people writing me and making accusations that I'm somehow part of a conspiracy, etc. And I understand where it's coming from, and I meet you with love, because it hurts my heart when you don't understand where I'm coming from. And not for myself, but for you, because I feel there's peace to be found in it. And so, let me start by saying that some of us, when we go on these journeys, we do meet beings with form of a higher spiritual realm, a higher dimension, a higher vibratory state than we are. And sometimes people come across beings like that who are not necessarily energy like that, if you want, beings energy that is not necessarily unconditionally loving. And when you look at the oppression of mankind in any form, what we are often calling oppression, which is deception, we are calling for a space of truth, honesty and unconditional love, where we seem to be in the most part opposed to being deceived, etc. And yet our species are doing it. And so I want to take you through my personal journey when I was out in Tanzania. After I surrendered my my personal identity, and it popped in fasting. I, not as John, I here as a record keeper of the journey this human went on, when spirit moved in, when I became a state of pure attention, and in that state, in the present moment, in the moment where all happens and only happens, this arising inside me was just constantly saying, stay here, stay with me, stay here. And I followed the synchronicity, the language of that space, and I followed it blindly, as it were, but also with ultimate trust. I just knew it was going somewhere important. And of course something beautiful did happen, and not as John taking any claim for this, but having kept a record here as this human where spirit was moving, this feeling of unconditional love started to manifest unconditionally loving things around my life. The children's village and the children coming out of child labour, etc. And so I have this beautiful journey recorded inside me, and I also know that I was in that state in a higher vibration. Now, somehow eventually moving in presence, you get to this point where it's like Neo in the Matrix and he sees the binary. You start to see, you get away the mental identity, and you come down that it's this separate personal self is an illusion. It's a story that you're playing out, but it's not you as the expression of nature. When we look at a tree, we say nature's doing that tree. When we look at self from the personal identity, we lose track that nature's doing you. It grew you from child to man. And so eventually when you get to there, I started to see even deeper, and I saw people as like a pillar of white light. Not physically, it was just an occurrence. And you see people who are very present, they have this light and this relaxation in their face. And people caught in the mind, you'll see it on the street, they're very tense, and the light is diminished from that. And it's as if the personal identity and the separation from this unconditional love that comes on that pillar of light, it's as if it refracts it and reduces the vibration. And so I felt, when I let go of the personal identity, I rose up this column of white light that I am to source. And when I went and followed source's direction by calling in the present moment to stay in the present moment, I went to Tanzania and I found all of these children suffering. And the vibration, the frequency behind the suffering was lower than my own. It was very evident to me. It was not unconditionally loving, the behavior of the people who had locked these children away, etc. And so I began watching as the power of the unconditional love, the will of unconditional love, works through humans who surrender personal identity. And when I watched this happening through myself and others, that spirit unified us together behind this common goal of elevating this suffering of these children, I saw beautiful loving things manifest, and these children leave the vibration of that suffering that had them locked in. Now on my journey, I began to incorporate a mental identity, and the mind is a tricky thing and will lower your vibration when it engages. And what I did was I had this space of unconditional love, but I separated myself as a separate identity away from that. And bit by bit, I started to decline in vibration, because I was creating an inward self-image of like a martyr. I wasn't including myself in this love. And then pride set in with the carnal mind, and starting to, oh, look what I've done. And it's bit by bit, the mind became very tricky, and I would say, I should fast, I should meditate. And the mind would say, no, you don't have time for that. You must go and help this child. And so it sounded plausible. Yeah, I need to help that child. I shouldn't deal with my frequency, my vibration. And because of that, bit by bit, my vibration came down because I wasn't looking after it. And I felt like there was a moment where it popped below a certain benchmark, a certain frequency, vibration of light. And when it went under there, I became catastrophically ill. And the children I had lifted out of this energy and into this beautiful light of protection and love that the village provides, I I wound up like those children. It was almost as if it pounced on me and took revenge, and I wound up in this lower vibrations grasp, and I ended up bedridden for many years, and I suffered a great deal in a very similar way to the way the children had suffered that I'd helped. And so with that in mind, and this feeling that I popped below a certain vibration, I can say now I'm only recovering as I separated from the work and this I must keep pushing. And I had trust and faith in others and in the white light of spirit, the column of white light that we all are connected to and are at the bottom of this. We are connected at the source of that, this unconditional love that comes out. I just surrendered and trusted that, and because of that my frequency is going up, and I feel like I came over the top and started now to recover because I came over this certain frequency that had hold of me. And so I felt I was oppressed by the origin of the oppression in my life, of the sickness. I felt was a higher dimension, a higher spiritual realm, a higher vibration of light. Now we are beings of light. This is what we are. We are light beings in a human body. In the experience of separation, to refind unity, this experience is so valuable. I love that I have the relationship with my wife and my children. It's so valuable. And finding, even talking to you guys, we're finding space together to reunify around that love, and it's a stunning thing. But when I see this now from my view of the way reality is, I see the root of the oppression was in a higher dimension. Light comes down, and matter is a space where light is expressing itself. But above here, there is realms of light that we are not privy to. We can't see it, but we can access and sense it. And so I wanted to start with that, to give you this example of having this notion that there's a vibration you can fall beneath. And it's not to scare anyone. I want to lead this to profound and beautiful truth, I hope, with this inquiry that I have witnessed and experienced myself. And so with that said, it seems to me that when I came below a certain vibration, I became oppressed by this light source which is creating the suffering and depression here on earth. And right now, we are facing many issues in the world, and people are feeling very oppressed and manipulated, and free will is being attacked. And I will say that there is a time where restricting free will is good. We restrict murder; it's an act of free will because it's good. It's safe for us. It protects our heart, our children, our loved ones, ourselves from this primitive, lower vibrational behavior. We are evolving, we are growing, and we are being clever with the restrictions on free will we have. But lately, of course, the biggest concern is people talking about the vaccine and concern about that. And this is seen as oppression by people, but I think the problem is that it's all about dishonesty. People feel there's something dishonest going on. And why do we feel that? Because we have witnessed that there's a lot of corruption and oppression from the certain behaviors of human beings. Now, if you can look at a human being, when we surrender, and we surrender the personal identity, and you could say we return to Eden instead of living from the bite of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, we are washed over with an unconditional love, and it gets you. And when you don't have that, humans, we've seen humans as an expression of light down here in manifestation of matter. When we separate from the surrender, the column of white light that we are, and we take the personal identity and we refract and lower the vibration, we refract that pillar of white light and we become a lower vibration. We've used our technology from that space, and we've enslaved one another, we've manipulated one another. And not only that, but we have pursued, because our vibration's so low, a way to satiate the absence of the unconditional love and peace it brings to us, of remembering, knowing that you are a continuance here, and so you're interconnected, and so it's a beautiful loving feeling to enter there. But we try to satiate that separation with modern day. There's a pornography epidemic, alcohol epidemic, drug epidemic. It's a persistent need for us to try and fill this void with something worldly. And we never really fill the void, as we all know. Our open heart is the void we are seeking, and these things we do to try and fill that, we close the heart further, sadly, is the irony of it. And so, however you might view this, whether you see this as an energetic exchange of the polarity that we are experiencing in matter, or you see that energy is playing something out, or you might see it as a higher spiritual realm, or you might see it, which has been discussed, as a higher dimension of sentient life. If whatever goes on in the light spectrum that we can't fully understand, but we can sort of witness as we travel through the higher vibrations in meditation, which we are created to be able to do. If you have been sold the belief you're just a matter on matter carrying tools being, you are beyond that. We know, many of us know, we can go within and we can go to the higher dimensions, as it were, the higher spiritual realms, and commune there and be guided from there. So if you just think you're matter on matter and you don't have that, then you're obviously a disengaged, a lesser version than what you can be. Not a fully realized version of who you can be if you don't know you can travel like this. But if humans do this as ultimately a spectrum of light, that means that light in other spaces, higher dimensions, might do this too, is how I see it. Meaning they might separate from the pillar of white light that we are, and separate from being surrendered into the moment and allowing that, and create a separate personal identity and try to control the experience, and in trying to control the experience mimic the source of creation, as we do with technology sometimes in a negative way as human beings. And so that would mean that light presumably would then need to satiate the gap it has from not being connected to that contentment and unconditional love of source. And so if you see it as spiritual, if you see it as energy playing out in polarity, then the things that we do to oppress one another to try and get energy, like buying into things like the pornography industry, which is strange behavior. If you went to an island and you met a new tribe and there were humans playing with themselves whilst watching other humans do that, and young girls who was, hey, you can have this shiny trinket if you do this performance while these men watch you and women watch you and pleasure themselves, you'd say this is very primitive and low energy. And yet because we have technology separating, we think it's not something we even engage, and so we take energy to try and bring ourselves up, and we get in this exchange of low vibration. Perhaps this higher dimensional force, spiritual force, needs to do the same. And who's to say that as that woman is oppressed by the pornography usage, etc., who's not to say that we are an oppressed aspect in the dimension of light moving into this dimension of that separation? And so it seems to me that when I fell below what I felt was this benchmark, that when we have this personal identity which comes from ego, be it a necessary natural development for us all to learn and awaken to this, or be it engineered into us from a higher realm, or who knows, I'm inquiring, then our vibration can be higher than this oppressive vibration, and we can have dominion over this situation and bring a system of more unconditional love and truth. Or it can be below there, and we can be oppressed by it. And so, when it seems that when we surrender the personal identity, we no longer need to work out how to love, because love becomes our nature and our vibration elevates. It just elevates straight away. And we go up into this space of unconditional love, and it's so overwhelming, and the heart is so free in there. And yet when we have separate personal identity, the vibration comes down. And not only that, but then when this higher dimension, which influences the dimension we live in, when it wants us to move away, perhaps, let's say, from the white pillar of light that we are, and engage in the lower vibrations, because the exchange of moving from this side of the polarity of the unconditional love that we all yearn to be, otherwise we wouldn't be protesting these things for honesty, truth, and against war, then having us behave against that is kind of pulling our energy into the other polarity, and the friction of that must generate some sort of benefit to the polarity of that energy as it's dragging and having this constant exchange. And so when we are wanting to see a world of more honesty and truth and beauty, when we are in here, and we've been in there so long, in this lower vibration of separate personal identity and the frustration, the angst, the anger that comes from there, it would appear that we become amnesic of the unconditional love that we can access. And so when something oppresses us or upsets us, for all we are aware that there should be truth, honesty and love, we fight it with a low vibration, and we try to fight matter on matter. But the reality is that you're trying to change something upstream in the light that's creating this material world, the origin of the influence of this material world, from downstream. And yet if you surrender and stop trying to fight with the personal identity, you end up upstream. And when you end up upstream energetically, you can actually change it. You can bring it in, because the lower energy that's creating the oppression on man is not founded in unconditional love, but its vibration can't go as high as that unconditional love because it's made a separation itself to control instead of surrender. And so when we surrender, we elevate above it, and we have influence here. Now, of course, this is not new, because did Jesus say the prince of this world is what he labelled Satan, this lesser vibrational origin of light, who had separated from the source, and that he, because he was one with the Father and surrendered to the will instead of trying to control it with a separate personal identity, had dominion in this world over that as the white light, the white pillar of light we've labelled Christ in Christianity. And he said his Father was not of this world, and that the prince of this world was a lesser being. And it's not this world, it's not this beautiful forest, it smells so wonderful. It's the world of man creating without surrender, creating off the back of his own separate personal identity, and collectively doing so is the world, the Babylon, as he referenced. And so my view is not that by surrendering and being still that you are surrendering to oppression or being controlled by some sort of lesser energy than truth and openness and love and honesty. It's that you are actually empowering and you are disarming, because when you act out of the separate personal identity of I'm just British fighting a British government, you don't acknowledge that you can raise your vibration and frequency to a very high place, and you can go through this, and you have the anatomy to make this journey, the anatomy of prayers within you, and you have it. It's there. You were built that way. But when you are programmed by this mind, this ego, this separate personal identity which is in us, your vibration never goes up there. And so if you are to look at oppression's origin, is maybe something to do with, we say, this exchange of polarity, and we can raise our vibration up. The beautiful thing about all of this inquiry that I'm making, if I'm anywhere correct with it, is that the only way that we can elevate our vibration above there, and that is that we must elevate our frequency to sow the seeds upstream to the higher frequency of light. The spectrum of light is coming to this space of matter that we are originating from it. Go above the origin of the frequency that's sowing the negativity that we don't want to see, the separation from the unconditional love. And to do that, you can't do it with the separate person. You surrender. And when you surrender, you can go there. When you surrender, you seem to be able to elevate into that space of more unconditional love, and start sowing seeds upstream, closer to the source of nutrition, than the lower vibration sowing the seeds of suffering, and so manifest here in matter the beautiful and loving unconditional world that many of us deep in the middle of our hearts, for all buried, are calling for. And unfortunately, unless we go above that vibration, the seeds we sow are beneath. The seeds there was a plane went by, and that's the jet stream sucking in above, in case you're curious of the sound. I was saying that the seeds you sow beneath in this downward stream are not going to take root, but if you go higher it will. And this is how I see it with my perception. And so the only way to get to the higher vibration and the origin of our oppression is surrendering in the light of silence. It's to become the stillness that then takes over. The separate personal identity is like it refracts that beautiful unconditional love, and the vibration must be lower because of it. And when you let go of that, it can just travel with freedom. You don't have any fears, anxieties, and any lack of, and you don't engage in anger, and you don't engage in all of this, and so your seeds are rooted in a more beautiful place. And so surrendering to the light of silence is, to me, the way, because this is how we elevate to that higher vibration, which ultimately, when we plant the seeds there, do cast a shadow over the negativity and suffering of this world. And having had personal experience in a part of the world where there was a great deal of difficulty doing what manifests as spirit working through me as human speaking to you with a record of it, then I can say that when my vibration was high and I was fully surrendered and no personal identity was being hung on to and lowering and refracting that pillar of white light, then I was having great influence. And when I fell below that had influence upon myself. And so this is how I see it. There is a time for matter on matter. Of course, you must defend yourself if it comes that way. But if we are to, as a species, change the expression of what's manifesting in this matter, we need to go upstream from the origin of it and plant the seeds there. Because right now the seeds of creation, of war, are coming from a lower vibration than the vibration of unconditional love. And that lower vibration, when you see it in mankind, who are an expression of light, is occurring only because they separate from the source and the surrender of being the complete pillar of white light that we are. And this is why I say surrender is humanity's hope. And the beauty is there's nothing you need to do. You don't need to go Google and read up. If it feels right in your soul, you just now need to raise your frequency and trust like you trust a friend, that the universe from that space will show you where to plant your seeds. And keep record of that journey, but don't create an image of the records of the journey happening, or you'll descend and be subdued into sickness, etc., as I was on my journey. This is how I see it with my inquiry. Right or wrong, tell me how it feels in your heart. In mine, it feels pretty good, which is why I go on this journey of inquiry and not telling. I'm just trying to interpret the reality before me as a state of pure attention and listening, and not keeping a record and an identity and an opinion of what I observe, listen, and am attention of. I love to you all. Bye, guys.
When you look into your imagination, we'll begin with a spin, traveling in the world of my creation, living there. You will see what you truly wish to be.